3 years into our marriage, she slapped me across the face in the boardroom for another man. She said, "Stephen, give him the company. You don't deserve it." I smiled. No tears, no shouting, no flipping the table. I quietly signed the stock transfer agreement and even slid the company seal across the table to him. Everyone thought I'd folded. What they didn't know was this. There was an $80 million hole sitting in the company's books. My hand was shaking when I signed. Not because I was angry, because I was afraid she might change her mind. Chapter 01. Grace walked into the conference room, and every executive immediately stood up. Not out of respect, but because there was a man walking behind her. Charles, her college sweetheart, the one people called the perfect one that got away. A foreign-educated finance prodigy with a reputation for being exceptionally capable. I was sitting at the head of the table, a cup of coffee still steaming in my hand. For a brief second, when I saw them walk in side by side, I thought I must be seeing things. But Grace's very first sentence told me that today's meeting had nothing to do with quarterly earnings. Stephen Koo. She called me by my full name. The last time she'd done that was 3 years ago, when we signed our marriage certificate. I set down my coffee. "What is it?" She walked toward me, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Then she raised her hand. Smack. Her palm landed squarely across my left cheek. The entire room fell silent. The pen in Casey's hand slipped free and rolled under the table. He stared blankly for 3 seconds before even thinking about picking it up. My head turned to the side. My left ear rang. It didn't hurt. It really didn't. But I still put on the expression of a man whose heart had just been shattered. After all, I'd been waiting 3 months for that slap. Grace's eyes were red. Whether it was genuine emotion or just another performance, I couldn't tell. Her acting had improved considerably over the past 3 years. "Stephen, give him the company." She pointed at Charles behind her. Then she looked back at me. "You don't deserve it." Charles stood behind her with a calm expression. His eyes carried that particular look that said, "I'm sorry things turned out this way, but I really am better than you." His tailored suit fit perfectly. His hair was immaculate. The entire man radiated the energy of a self-help success guru. I almost lost my composure. There were 11 executives in the room. Not a single one spoke. Some stared at their phones. Some studied the ceiling. Others suddenly became deeply fascinated by a bottle of mineral water sitting on the conference table. My secretary, Selena, stood in the corner. She was biting her lip so hard it was nearly bleeding. She was the only person in the room who knew the company's real financial situation. Other than me. I took a deep breath and stood up. "Okay." Grace froze. She had clearly been prepared for a screaming match. Charles looked surprised as well. Neither of them had expected things to go this smoothly. I walked to the other side of the conference table and picked up the stock transfer agreement that legal had prepared in advance. I flipped to the last page, signed my name, stamped it, then slid the company seal toward Charles. The entire process took less than 2 minutes. Casey finally bent down and picked up his pen. He looked at me. The expression on his face was so complicated it could have filled an 800-word essay. Chapter 02. Casey had been with the company's finance department for years. He knew exactly what those numbers meant, but he didn't dare say a word, because Grace was Walter's daughter. Walter might have retired, but he still carried plenty of influence in the industry. I slid the signed documents across the table toward Grace. "Go ahead and sign." She picked up the pen. Her hand was shaking, maybe from excitement, maybe from emotion. After all, she was finally getting to unite the men she loved most with the company. How romantic. I silently applauded her in my head. After signing, Grace looked at me. Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something. I didn't give her the chance. "I've already moved my things out. The house is yours. I'll take the car. It's not worth much anyway. So let's call it me taking advantage of you." I grabbed the car keys from the table and walked toward the door. "Oh, right." I glanced back at Charles. He straightened his back and met my gaze. "Congratulations." After saying that single word, I pushed the door open and left. The hallway stretched endlessly ahead. My dress shoes clicked against the marble floor. Tap, tap, tap. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside and pressed the button for basement level 1. The moment the doors closed, I smiled. Not a bitter smile. Not a cold smile. The kind of smile that comes from finally throwing away a scorching hot potato you've been desperate to get rid of. A smile of pure relief. I covered my face and crouched in the corner of the elevator. My shoulders shook uncontrollably. By the time I reached the parking garage, got into my car, and shut the door, I laughed for a full 30 minutes. I laughed until I was short of breath. Laughed until my ribs hurt. Laughed until tears covered the steering wheel. It's not that I'm crazy. It's just that none of them knew. There was an $80 million hole sitting in that company's books. 80 million. Not 8,000. I'd seen those audit reports last year. I'd been dealing with those supplier debts since the year before. The failed projects. The lawsuit settlements. The tax recovery notices from unpaid taxes. Every single one of them was sitting in my desk drawer. I had emailed Grace 3 times, sent her 2 messages, spent 40 minutes on a phone call trying to explain the company's financial situation. Her exact response had been, "Can you please be a little more ambitious? Stop bothering me with company problems all the time." Fine, then I wouldn't bother her anymore. Today, she took the company away from me. Thank you. Seriously. I pulled out my phone from the glove compartment and sent Gail a message. "Gail, are you free tonight? Barbecue's on me." 3 seconds later, he replied, "You're paying? Did the sun rise in the west? What happened? Got divorced? What time? I'm heading over right now to beat that woman up." No. I quickly typed back, "This dinner is a celebration." The other side went silent for 10 seconds. Then one word appeared, "You've lost it." I smiled and started the engine. My phone rang. Walter. I glanced at the caller ID and immediately declined the call. Today was the happiest day I'd had in 3 years. My father-in-law. No, my former father-in-law. Could wait until another day. Chapter 03. Gail's barbecue joint sat in a forgotten corner of the south side of town. 20 tables. No air conditioning. Just 3 industrial fans working overtime. Beer was $2.50 a bottle. The skewers sat in plastic baskets on top of a freezer. Customers grabbed their own food. And when they finished eating, the bill was calculated by counting the sticks. By the time I arrived, Gail had already claimed a table. 8 bottles of beer sat in front of him. 4 were already open. All of them his. "All right, talk." He shoved an open bottle into my hand. "What happened?" I told him everything that had happened today. Word for word. Well, almost. I left out the part where I'd laughed in my car for 30 minutes. When I finished, Gail slammed his chopsticks onto the table. "That Grace is unbelievable. She slapped you in front of everyone. Who the hell does she think she is? You practically killed yourself keeping that company afloat for 3 years. Gail. The company owes $80 million. Gail froze. A skewer was still hanging from his mouth. His jaw dropped so far it looked ready to hit the table. He sat there like a statue for a full 10 seconds. Then he slowly pulled the skewer out of his mouth and set it down. "How much?" $80 million, maybe more. "What do you mean?" "I mean Grace forced me to hand the company over to Charles today. And right now they're probably popping champagne." I paused, celebrating the fact that they've just acquired a shell company buried under $80 million of debt. Gail opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, closed it again. Then he grabbed his beer, chugged half the bottle, and wiped his mouth hard. "You mean you're happy?" "I'm very happy." "You're seriously happy?" "I've never been happier in my life." Gail stared at me for a full 10 seconds. Then he smacked my shoulder and burst out laughing. The laughter started as a chuckle, then became a cackle, then turned into uncontrollable howling. He doubled over the table, pounding the plastic stool with his fist. A guy at the next table turned around and looked at us like we'd both lost our minds. "That's brilliant." Gail wiped tears from his eyes. "What do you even call this? Fighting over the right to suffer? Volunteering to take over a disaster? Something like that. Does Charles know?" "Nope." He spent the entire meeting standing behind Grace with his chest puffed out and his eyes full of determination. I took a sip of beer. He looked exactly like the winner of a startup competition walking on stage to collect a trophy. Gail burst into another fit of laughter. Then he suddenly thought of something. "Wait, if things were this bad, why didn't you just shut the company down? Or file for bankruptcy?" I took another drink. "You think Walter would have let me?" I shook my head. That company was his life's work. Besides, I was the legal representative. If we'd gone into bankruptcy and liquidation, I would have been the first person hit by the fallout. I looked at the beer bottle in my hand. For the last 3 years, I've been trying to fill the hole. I smiled helplessly. Then I realized there was another hole underneath the hole. So the legal representative has changed now. Yep. Charles signed the stock transfer agreement today. The paperwork for changing legal ownership was already prepared by legal. I raised my bottle and clinked it against Gail's. The moment he signed, every debt and every lawsuit, clink, stopped being my problem. The joy on Gail's face slowly transformed into something that looked suspiciously like admiration. "Stephen, what? Were you waiting for this day all along?" "No." I shook my head honestly. I genuinely wanted to save that company. I paused. I just couldn't. Grace didn't believe me. Walter thought I was exaggerating. I issued 3 financial risk warnings. All 3 were ignored. So when you realized it couldn't be saved, the only thing left to do was wait for someone else to take it. And they jumped into the fire pit themselves. I smiled. She pushed him in with her own hands. Both of us fell silent for 3 seconds. Then we burst out laughing at the same time. That night, I drank the most satisfying 8 beers of my life. When it was time to leave, Gail insisted on walking me out, with one arm around my shoulder. He asked curiously, "What do you think Charles will do tomorrow on his first day as boss?" I thought about it. "He'll probably replace the artwork in the office first. He's obsessed with appearances." I heard he framed 2 copies of his master's degree. One hangs in his office. The other hangs above his bed. Gail snorted. Then what? Then he'll have someone clear out all my belongings and renovate the CEO's office. And then, I looked at him meaningfully. He'll open the drawer and find the financial statements. Gail shuddered. Damn, I almost feel sorry for him. Don't. I patted him on the shoulder. Feel sorry for the 80 million instead. Chapter 04. How did I know what Charles's first day on the job was like? Selena texted me. Selena was my former secretary. Yesterday, Grace informed her that starting today, she'd be serving as Charles's assistant. Her message read, CEO Koo, the new boss told me to clear out everything from your office. Do you want me to mail you that cactus of yours? I replied. Just throw it away. I've been watering that cactus for 3 years. The only reason it's still alive is pure willpower. Kind of like the company. Selena sent back a wry smile emoji. Half an hour later, another message arrived. Charles just finished meeting with the executives. Casey reported last quarter's financials. He's locked himself in the office now. Literally locked the door. I was at home eating instant noodles. Yes, instant noodles. Not because I was broke. Because during our 3 years of marriage, Grace wouldn't let me eat them. She said the smell was too strong. Now that I was free, I'd bought every flavor on the supermarket shelf. Beef, pickled mustard greens, Sichuan pepper beef, tomato and egg. The one in front of me right now was hot and sour flavor. I hadn't had it in 3 years. I slurped up a huge mouthful of noodles. My toes practically curled with happiness. A taste of heaven. While eating, I texted Selena back. Don't worry. Last quarter's report was just the appetizer. Selena replied. What do you mean? I answered. He'll understand when he sees last year's annual report. Selena replied. CEO Koo, I'm getting a little scared. I typed. Scared of what? You're an employee. The company has a new owner. As long as payroll goes out, you'll get every penny you're owed. If it doesn't, that's not your fault either. Selena responded. That's not what I'm worried about. I'm worried Charles might pass out and nobody will be there to catch him. I almost choked on my noodles. At 1 in the afternoon, another message came in. Charles asked Casey to pull all financial records from the last 3 years. Casey spent 40 minutes on the phone and carried 3 boxes of files into the office. The door is locked again. At 2 o'clock, 3 suppliers came to collect overdue payments. Charles met with them for about 20 minutes. When he came out, his glasses were completely fogged up and the muscles in his cheeks were twitching. 3 suppliers. Only 3. Before I left, there were actually 14 suppliers with outstanding payments. Those 3 were the nicest ones. The other 11 were probably still on their way. I put down my phone and turned on the television. After flipping through 3 channels, I found a comedy movie. The sound of laughter mixed with the aroma of instant noodles made life feel exceptionally good. At 6 in the evening, Grace called. I hesitated for a moment, not because I was deciding whether to answer, because I was deciding what tone of voice to use. In the end, I chose not to answer. After I declined the call, she called twice more. I picked up on the 3rd attempt. Hello, Stephen. Explain something to me. Why does the company owe Tianhe Building Materials $1,200,000? Her voice jumped up an entire octave. I had to pull the phone a couple of inches away from my ear. I'd grown tired of that tone 3 years ago. That's the final payment for the October construction project last year. I told you about it. You were vacationing in Sanya at the time. Your exact reply was, stop bothering me with trivial things like this. Silence. 2 seconds. Then why didn't you handle it? I did. I drafted a payment plan that required your approval and signature. But that day, you and Charles went to a concert. You never came back to the office. After that, I followed up twice more. No response. Silence again. Longer this time. What about the others? Casey said there are a whole bunch of. I told you about all of them. By email, by text, and in person. 3 methods. 7 times in total. You didn't respond once. You, Grace. I interrupted her. You're a shareholder now. These are your problems. And Charles's. I'm just the ex-husband who walked away with nothing. There's not much I can do. You. Oh, by the way, I added casually. A few more suppliers might stop by tomorrow. Try to be polite. Don't make my mistake. I was too nice. That's why they kept chasing me down. I hung up. Then I brewed myself a cup of tea. Long Jing. When Grace lived here, she only drank coffee. She always said tea tasted bland. Bland. I took a sip. The fragrance was light and refreshing. Not bland at all. Chapter 05. By Charles's 3rd day as CEO, I already knew exactly what was happening. How? Because Selena had developed a habit of giving me live updates. I'd told her she didn't need to anymore. I wasn't part of that company now. She replied, CEO Koo, I'm not giving you work reports. I'm telling you jokes. Fair enough. The jokes were pretty entertaining. The 3rd day's joke went like this. Charles hired an auditing firm to conduct a full audit. The decision itself was absolutely correct. If he'd done it on day one, he might still have had a chance to turn the ship around. Unfortunately, he spent his first 2 days doing 3 other things. First, he completely redecorated the executive office. Second, he held a company-wide meeting and delivered a 40-minute inaugural speech titled, "Looking Toward the Future." Third, as the new CEO, he took Grace to a 3-Michelin-star restaurant and posted a photo online with the caption, "A New Beginning." Those 3 activities consumed 2 full days. The auditors didn't enter the company until day 3. By day 4, according to Selena, the lead auditor's expression looked like someone who'd just eaten expired century eggs. The preliminary conclusion: the company's financial problems were far worse than they appeared on paper. The detailed numbers were still being calculated, but the confirmed accounts payable alone were enough to send the lead auditor to the restroom twice just to splash water on his face. I was at home playing ranked matches when I read the message. Promotion series. 5-game winning streak. A critical match. My character was in the middle of a team fight. I glanced at my phone. My hand shook. The enemy instantly deleted me from existence with a full combo. Not because I was scared, because I was trying too hard not to laugh. One of my teammates cursed in chat. I quietly typed, "Sorry, got some good news," and lost focus. What kind of good news makes you feed like that? My ex-wife's new boyfriend just inherited my disaster of a company. The teammate went silent for 3 seconds, then replied, "Bro, that's not good news." Huh. That's the greatest news I've heard all week. Keep playing. I'll carry this one. We won. Maybe it was psychological, but I played exceptionally well after that. At 3 in the afternoon, I went grocery shopping. Actual grocery shopping. During our 3 years of marriage, I was always the one who cooked. Grace never stepped into the kitchen. She didn't even know how to use the microwave. The funny thing was, she barely touched anything I made. Too oily, too salty. MSG wasn't healthy. Now the kitchen belonged to me. I bought a sea base and planned to steam it, following my mother's recipe. Ginger strips underneath, scallions on top, steam for 8 minutes, finish with hot oil. I was picking out scallions at the supermarket when I ran into Grace's best friend, Jenna. The moment Jenna saw me, her expression switched instantly. A slight furrow of the brows, lips pressed into a thin line, eyes full of sympathy. The universal expression for, "I understand your pain. Steven, are you okay?" Her voice was soft and careful, as though she feared my fragile soul might shatter if she spoke too loudly. I was holding a fish. My cart contained a bag of rice, 2 bottles of soy sauce, and a package of Sichuan peppercorns. "I'm doing fine. I heard about what happened between you and Grace." She sighed dramatically. "Don't be too upset. You're a man. Pick yourself up. There are plenty of fish in the sea." Thanks." I nodded and continued examining scallions. Jenna looked at my shopping cart. Her expression became even more complicated. She was probably thinking, the former CEO of a company, reduced to grocery shopping and cooking alone. 1 man, 1 fish, 1 bag of rice. How pitiful. Meanwhile, my actual thoughts were, this scallion looks great. Nice thick white stock. Perfect for steamed fish. If you need anything, just let me know. Jenna patted my arm. "Sure, thanks." After she left, I stood there for 5 seconds, then looked down at myself. A t-shirt, shorts, flip-flops, pushing a shopping cart while carrying a fish. I did look remarkably similar to a middle-aged man crushed by life, except I was only 31, and I was having the time of my life. Chapter 06. The steamed sea base turned out perfectly. I snapped a photo and posted it online with the caption, "Dinner for one. The best seasoning is freedom." Gail was the first to like it. His comment read, "Your ex-wife finished signing those share transfer papers, right? Legally airtight now." I replied, "Relax. It's nailed down tighter than the skewers at your barbecue joint." Grace's social media, on the other hand, had gone unusually quiet. 2 days earlier, she'd posted that photo with Charles and the caption, "A New Beginning." Since then, a stranger had left a comment underneath. "So, did you get a new boyfriend?" She never replied. I was cleaning up the kitchen after dinner when my phone rang again. An unfamiliar number. I answered. "Hello, is this CEO Koo? This is Manager Lou from Mars Steel about the remaining $3 million from last year's steel shipment." "Manager Lou, nice to meet you." I interrupted politely. "Unfortunately, I'm no longer involved with the company. The legal representative has changed. His name is Charles, much more capable than me, foreign educated, too." There was a pause. The company's under new management." "It is. You can contact him directly." Then do you happen to have his number?" I scrolled through my contacts, found Charles's phone number, and sent it over. "Best of luck with the negotiations." After hanging up, I washed the last bowl and placed it on the drying rack. The kitchen lights reflected brightly off the tiles. Quiet, clean, just me. I took a deep breath. A smile slowly spread across my face. Life like this was pretty wonderful. Chapter 07. Charles's 5th day as CEO. At this point, Selena's updates had officially evolved from jokes into a full-blown drama series. 9 a.m. CEO coup. People from Wanhua Building Materials just showed up. 6 of them. 2 are bald. Big arms. Even bigger voices. How much do we owe them? 4,800,000. Construction payments from last September. Right. I remembered that one. I negotiated an installment plan with them back then. Later the cash flow collapsed, so it never happened. Charles went out to meet them. He got yelled at for 20 minutes. When he came back, his tie was crooked and the second button on his shirt had popped off. I was watering plants on my balcony. Yes, plants. A few pothose vines I'd brought home from the company when I moved out. Grace had taken the company. Surely she wasn't going to fight me over a few potted plants too. By the time I reached the 3rd pot, I nearly watered my own shoes. Barely managed to stop myself. 11 a.m. Another group just arrived. Mars Steel. 3 million. Casey went out to deal with them. He held them off for half an hour. When he came back, his forehead was covered in sweat and the collar of his shirt was completely soaked. 2 p.m. The logistics company showed up. 2 million. They didn't cause a scene, but before leaving, they said, "Pay within 3 days or we'll see you in court." 4 p.m. Charles smashed a mug in his office. The one you used to use. The one that said, "The boss is always right." That mug had been a gift from Gail. A sarcastic gift. I never expected it would meet its end in someone else's hands. A fitting death. All things considered. 6 p.m. Grace showed up. Not to see me. To go to the company. According to Selena, she stayed in Charles's office for 2 hours. When they came out, neither looked happy. For the first time, Charles didn't walk her to the elevator. I stared at the stream of messages on my phone and quietly sipped my chrysanthemum goji berry tea. To be honest, I felt the tiniest bit of, no, not guilt, curiosity. What I was curious about was this. How exactly was he planning to fill that $100 million hole? No, wait, officially it was still only 80 million. He was supposed to be a foreign-educated finance prodigy. Surely he had some tricks up his sleeve. At 8 that night, my phone rang again. This time it wasn't Grace. It was her father, Walter. The old man's voice came through the speaker with the calm authority of an elder. Little Coo. For 3 years, he'd called me that. Little Coo. Never son-in-law. Not once. Yes, uncle. I heard the company is having some difficulties. An $80 million crater reduced to one word. Impressive. The older generation of entrepreneurs really knew how to downplay a disaster. Yes, there are some difficulties. A pause. Then, when you were running the company, why didn't you mention any of this? I almost laughed. I bit my lip and took 3 deep breaths. Uncle, I did mention it. Last June, I sent you a financial analysis report. 17 pages, printed in color, with charts, pie charts, bar graphs, the full package. Well, and your exact response was, young people always exaggerate problems. This company has been running for 20 years. Nothing serious will happen. The line went silent. For a long time. Long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Uncle, was there anything else? I need to reheat dinner. No. The call ended. I walked into the kitchen and opened the microwave. Beep. Inside was the leftover steamed sea bass from yesterday. A minute later, it was hot again. The fish was reheated. So was my life. Chapter 08. On Charles's 10th day as CEO, everything fell apart. Not a little apart. The kind of collapse where a dam bursts and the whole thing comes crashing down in one deafening wave. The final audit report came out. The company's total debt wasn't 80 million. It was 120 million. The extra 40 million came from off-the-books liabilities. A mess left behind by Walter's generation. Hidden inside subsidiaries of subsidiaries, layered one beneath another. The accounting tricks had survived for 15 years. A full audit finally dragged them into the light. I learned all this from Selena. To be honest, even I froze when I saw the number. I knew about the 80 million, 120 million. Good Lord, the company was in even worse shape than I thought. Good thing I got out when I did. According to Selena, Charles's reaction to the number was, he sat in his office for 40 straight minutes without moving. Didn't say a single word. Coffee from his thermos spilled all over the report, and he didn't even wipe it up. He just stared at the ceiling without blinking. Then he called Grace. Selena overheard fragments of the conversation. Grace, this company isn't what you told me it was. What? No, that's not what I mean. Will you calm down and listen to me? Grace. The call was disconnected. Grace hung up. I didn't know why. Maybe she panicked. Maybe she didn't want to hear it. Or maybe she'd finally realized that what she'd taken from me wasn't a gold mine. It was a ticking time bomb, and she'd personally placed the detonator in Charles's hands. Day 11. I received a lawyer's letter. Not one aimed at me. It had been sent on Charles's behalf. The wording was very diplomatic. Given the possibility that material information may not have been fully disclosed during the equity transfer process, our client reserves the right to pursue all available legal remedies. Translated into plain English, you never told me the company had this much debt. You set me up. I looked at the letter and shook my head with a smile. Then I walked into my study and pulled out a file folder from a drawer. Inside were neatly organized documents, 3 printed emails, each accompanied by Grace's acknowledgement receipts, 2 screenshots of our chat history, complete with delivery confirmations and read timestamps, a burned CD containing a 40-minute phone call recording, every minute carefully annotated with summaries, and 3 written financial risk warnings, each bearing Grace's signature. Yes, she signed every single one. Every single one. She simply signed them, tossed them into a drawer, and never looked at them again. I took a photo of the evidence and sent it to a lawyer friend. Take a look. Do I have enough documentation? 3 minutes later, he replied. Enough. You've got enough to drown someone. If he actually sues you, you could counterclaim for malicious litigation. And I've reviewed your equity transfer agreement. Clause 14 is crystal clear. The transferee acknowledges full understanding of the target company's operating condition and voluntarily assumes all associated risks. He signed it himself. I placed the lawyer's letter back into the folder. When the agreement was being drafted, legal had asked whether I wanted that clause included. I said yes, absolutely yes. Then legal asked, won't they read the contract carefully? I laughed. If she doesn't read financial reports, what makes you think she'll read a contract? Turns out I was right. That night, I made an exception and opened a bottle of wine. Grace had kept it in the wine cabinet. She'd always said Charles brought it back from France. She'd never been willing to open it. When I moved out, it somehow ended up packed into one of my boxes. A second label, Lafite. Not outrageously expensive, but tonight, it tasted exceptionally sweet. Chapter 09. On Charles's 15th day as CEO. He wanted to quit, but he couldn't. The change of legal ownership had already been completed. He was now the company's legal representative and controlling shareholder. The debts, the lawsuits, the tax recovery claims, every single one of them was attached to his name. Want to walk away? The law wouldn't allow it. Not unless he could find someone else willing to take over. And there weren't many people in this world more gullible than he was. Before resigning, Selena posted one final update. Not to me, to her old high school group chat. The screenshot eventually made its way around the internet. It read, Daily Update. Everyone, our company's new CEO has officially evolved from full of ambition to dead inside. During today's meeting, he stared at the ceiling for 8 straight minutes without saying a word. When the meeting ended, he walked through the wrong door, entered the janitor's closet, and sat next to a mop bucket for 5 minutes before coming back out. The replies below were almost identical. More updates. Hurry. Following this story, this is better than a web novel. When Gail forwarded me the screenshot, I was cooking noodles. Homemade noodles. I had kneaded the dough myself, with a fried egg and 2 slices of braised beef on top. My quality of life was steadily improving. Your former secretary has become an internet novelist. Gail followed the message with 10 laughing until crying emojis. She worked for me for 3 years. Her writing skills had plenty of time to develop. Has she produced more content in these 2 weeks than you did in 3 years? Shut up. Charles tried to transfer the shares back to Grace. Grace refused. Her reasoning was, this is my father's company. I can't let it collapse because of me. You figure something out. Aren't you a foreign-educated finance genius? According to rumors, Charles responded, I studied financial theory, not disaster response. Grace shot back, didn't you always say that if someone gave you a platform, you could accomplish great things? That only works if it's a normal platform, not a $120 million sinkhole. Can't you come up with something? All my solutions combined wouldn't even cover the interest on this hole. These details came from Selena before she left. The actual conversation was probably much less polite. According to her, it included a generous amount of colorful language and emotional exclamations. Grace stormed out and slammed the door behind her. Charles stayed alone in his office until midnight. Chapter 10. Day 17. Walter came to see me. He stood alone at my front door. No driver, no assistant, no daughter. When I opened the door, I was wearing flip-flops and a cheap t-shirt I'd bought from a street market. He looked me up and down. 3 years ago, when he'd married his daughter to me, I wore tailored suits. My hair was thicker. My posture was straight. I looked like a man ready to conquer the world. Now I was standing there in shorts and a sleeveless shirt. Yet somehow, I looked more alive than I had back then. The confusion in his eyes was impossible to hide. Uncle, would you like to come in? No. He waved his hand. I only came to ask one question. Go ahead. You knew the company couldn't survive, didn't you? I did. Then why didn't you leave? I looked at him. When you handed the company to me, I promised I'd do my best. And I did. For 3 years. But the hole was too big. My abilities weren't enough to fill it. I told Grace 7 times. She didn't believe me. I brought it up to you once. You didn't believe me either. And then you just waited. I didn't wait. I shook my head. I tried taking loans to keep the company alive. I cut failing projects. I negotiated payment plans with suppliers one by one. But none of that solved the real problem. The company's profits couldn't cover its historical debt. And I don't have hundreds of millions of dollars lying around to bail it out. A muscle twitched in Walter's cheek. The day Grace asked you to sign the transfer agreement. That was her idea, not mine. From beginning to end, the only thing I did was have legal add a clause to the contract. The transferee acknowledges full understanding of the company's operating condition. The old man closed his eyes for a moment. You kid, uncle. I spoke calmly. I wasn't trying to trap anyone. I was genuinely carrying more than I could handle. If she wanted the company, she could have it. She just should have read the financial statements first. That responsibility isn't mine. Walter stood there in silence. For a long time, the evening breeze lifted a few strands of his white hair. Finally, he asked, "Is there any way to save the company now?" I thought about it. The cleanest option is bankruptcy and liquidation. Charles is the legal representative now. He can initiate the process. The sooner, the better. The longer they wait, the more interest and penalties will pile up. Walter lowered his gaze. And Grace, and Charles, that's their problem now. My voice remained steady. Uncle, it's not that I'm heartless. I simply can't help, and I shouldn't. When Walter finally turned and left, his back looked a little more hunched than when he'd arrived. I closed the door, stood in the entryway for a moment, then walked into the kitchen and took a yogurt from the refrigerator. Strawberry flavor, limited edition. I'd stood in line for 10 minutes that afternoon just to buy it. I sat on the couch, twisted off the cap, and drank it slowly. Then I casually checked my phone. A friend who worked in restaurant supply chain management had sent me a message. His team was building a new venture. They needed a partner with management experience. Was I interested? I set down the yogurt and carefully reviewed the project materials. The direction looked solid. The team was young and energetic. Most importantly, the company's books were spotless. Not a single dollar of hidden debt. I replied with one word. Let's talk. Chapter 11. On Charles's 21st day as CEO, the company officially entered bankruptcy liquidation. The creditors' meeting lasted an entire day. 14 suppliers, 3 banks, 2 individual creditors, and representatives from the tax bureau. Charles remained silent throughout the entire meeting. According to the final work update Selena sent before resigning, after signing the last document, Charles dropped his pen. It rolled across the table, reached the edge, fell to the floor, bounced twice. He didn't pick it up. Grace never showed up. Not once. She was absent from the entire creditors' meeting. The last update on her social media was still the one from 20 days ago. The post Charles had made, a new beginning. Recently, a new comment had appeared underneath it, from an account nobody recognized. Quite a beginning you've got there. 47 likes. Not from me. Seriously, not me. I'd been busy. I'd already gone through 2 rounds of interviews with the new company. The direction was confirmed. The paperwork was done. I was starting over from scratch. As a partner, base salary plus profit sharing. Nothing extravagant, but solid. On my first day, Gale took me out for drinks at his barbecue stand. Same old table. Beer was still $2.50. The skewers were still self-service. Eat first, count sticks later. I heard Charles is gone. Gale flipped a skewer and glanced at me. He is. After the bankruptcy proceedings, there are still a pile of legal obligations tied to him as the former legal representative. I heard he's already listed his apartment in Shanghai, trying to raise money to cover the portion he's personally liable for. Serves him right. Gale snorted. Guy saw a chance to play white knight and jumped straight into the trap. I wouldn't put all the blame on him. I shook my head. He genuinely didn't know how bad things were. Then who do we blame? Grace. I didn't answer. Gale took another bite of meat and didn't push further. Fine. Enough about them. How's the new job? Pretty good. Just have to build everything from the ground up again. Gale laughed. So what? You're 31, not 51. Just remember one thing this time. Never partner with someone who doesn't read financial reports. He pointed his skewer at me. Business or marriage? I laughed and kicked the leg of his stool. A month later, the new company was gradually finding its rhythm. One afternoon during lunch, I ran into Grace outside a cafe in a shopping mall. She'd changed, quite a bit. She'd lost weight. The meticulous makeup was gone. The designer handbags she'd once carried had been replaced by a simple canvas tote. She saw me too. We stood there looking at each other for about 3 seconds. She spoke first. Steven. Yeah. How have you been? Pretty good. I smiled. How about you? She forced a smile. It trembled before settling into place. The company. She lowered her eyes. That was my fault. I slipped my hands into my pockets and said nothing. I should have listened to you. The reports. The emails. I never read a single one. Charles left. He said I deceived him. You didn't deceive him. I looked at her calmly. You just didn't know how deep the water was yourself. Her shoulders trembled. Her eyes reddened immediately. Back then, seeing her cry would have broken my heart. During our first year of marriage, she'd cried once after a bad day at work. I'd held her and comforted her for an hour. Now, looking at those reddened eyes, I felt nothing dramatic. Not hatred, not indifference, just peace. I'd moved on. Grace. Yeah. Stop dwelling on it. Go to work. Live your life. Your father is getting older. Spend more time with him. She froze, then slowly nodded. I turned and walked away, without looking back. As I stepped out of the mall, sunlight fell across my face. Warm, comforting. My phone buzzed. A message from Gail. You coming tonight? Got some excellent beef today. Saved £2 before the suppliers took it. If you don't show up, I'm grilling it all myself. I replied. I'm coming. My treat. A few seconds later. You're paying. Did the sun rise in the west again? I laughed. Last time was my treat too. When are you upgrading that goldfish memory of yours? Last time. The last time you treated was the day your ex-wife stole that $80 million disaster. So what's the occasion this time? I looked at the screen and smiled, then typed. No special reason. The weather's nice today. I reached the parking lot, got into my car, inserted the key, started the engine. In the rearview mirror, my reflection looked back at me. Healthy complexion, and my hair. It seemed a little thicker than last month. An old song played on the radio. I hummed along for a few lines and pressed down on the accelerator. The car rolled out of the parking lot and merged into traffic. Sunlight streamed through the windshield, warm and bright. My time has only just begun.